Hello, and welcome to the Direct Action Podcast. Learn more at directactionunited.org. This episode, we're interviewing activist Rabbi Yisroel Dovid Weiss. We'll get to know him through his decades of work as an anti-Zionist rabbi, as well as get a history lesson in Judaism, Zionism, and Palestine. Details and mentioned links in the episode description. Rabbi Weiss, what is your overall mission in what you do?
Okay, so first, I pray to the Almighty to bestow upon me His truth, His wisdom, that I may be worthy of conveying His message, and so, inshallah, sanctify His name and bring peace to the world. I'm a religious Jew. I follow I adhere to my religion of Judaism, and because I'm a religious Jew, we are required to clarify to the world that actions and movements that are standing and claiming that they are representing my religion, that they are, well, in this case, occupying and creating a state in the name of my religion, that this is that is totally false. It is a requirement upon us because it is what they're doing. The Zionist state of Israel and their occupation is a terrible crime, a rebellion against God, and they're simply masquerading. They're using the facade totally as it is some type of spiritual requirement. It is the basics of our religion, and really our rabbis, leaders of our community, the chief rabbi of Palestine of blessed memory, Rabbi Teitelbaum, pleaded with his followers that we should, at the cost of our lives, even the people will stand up and God forbid attack us viciously, we should still stand up and speak out and tell the world that this is totally wrong. It's against God, it's unjust, and it's really not Judaism. So basically, and that's designed in the state of Israel. So let me just clarify what my religion, Judaism, is a religion of 3,000 years. It started 3,000 years ago, children of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, that we were required to be subservient to the Almighty. We made a covenant on Mount Sinai. Moshe Rabbeinu, Moses took the Jews, the children of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Their descendants were in Egypt, enslaved by Pharaoh. Moses took them out of Egypt with miracles and took this into Mount Sinai. In Mount Sinai, Moses went up on Mount Sinai and brought the Torah. God gave us the Torah to the children of Israel. Over 1 million people were there, basically, and we made a covenant to be subservient to God and uphold the laws of the Torah. This is called Judaism. That is what Judaism is. So it's a religion of 3,000 years, and we are required to adhere to this. We are required to adhere to this law, to this Torah, this covenant, till today. It has never changed. It cannot change. It's from God, who's above time, above space. This is our basically our religion, our covenant. And the covenant that we made with God is basically not to kill, not to steal, and to follow all the laws of the Torah, keep Sabbath, keep all the laws of the Torah. In the back. I'm sorry. Yeah. Therefore, the Jewish people have found themselves in many times through this 3,000 years space till today. Many times that were trials and tribulations, times that were not easy. Yet we never strayed from the teachings of the Torah. In fact, there were times they tried to forcefully convert the Jews out of our religion, but the Jews, the ones who remained true to the Torah at the cost of our lives. We do believe that there was a time 2,000 years ago. Remember, the religion is 3,000 years ago, 3,000 years. God required us at that time that when we made this covenant, we should go into the Holy Land and build a temple and we have to be on a high level of spirituality. That was one of the basics of Judaism at the time when we took the Torah. But God stipulated that if we're not up to that level of spirituality that's required, we will be expelled from the land as a nation. And that's if anybody looks into the books of prophets, Jeremiah, Ezekiel, Isaiah, all the books of the prophets, the Jews were expelled from the land 2,000 years ago with the destruction of the temple. This is part of history. This is the basics of Jewish history. I don't think anybody refutes, because there were so many people and there was never a gap in our history. We're people of the book. Everything was written through this. This is the way history was. That Jews were. There was first the Romans. They were driven. Even there's the arch, Titus's arch, where you see how the Jews are driven, being led in chains when they were taken into Rome. And so Jews went through this history. 2,000 years ago, we were driven out of the land. Now, but our rabbis told us, our prophets and so forth, they told that the reason we are sent into exile was not because of our physical lacking, not because we were weak, but it was because of our sins. God warned us that if we're not going to be on the level of holiness that's required, we're going to be driven from the land. So 2,000 years ago, we were dispersed amongst the nations, driven from the land with the destruction of the temple. And we were put on the oath by God that we are forbidden to re-establish a Jewish sovereignty. We are forbidden to return en masse, in large numbers. We are forbidden to rebel against any nation. These are oaths that were given to the Jewish people. It's called the oaths of exile. And for 2,000 years, we went through, like I say, trials and tribulations, the Inquisition, crusades, many hardships, but we never attempted, even though there were many opportunities. There was called the Golden Age of Judaism, that we could have bought a land, we had the opportunity, but we never attempted to reestablish a Jewish sovereignty, because we understood as Jews, with our covenant to God, that we were in exile as a decree of God. We are not free to attempt to reestablish any Jewish sovereignty. We do, as Jews, yearn to be close to God. Our lives are to serve God. We keep Sabbath. As you see, we are religious Jews. We keep the laws of kosher. And we believe in that way we're sanctifying God's name. We do not kill. We do not steal. We try to do kindness and be a symbol of godliness. And that is sanctifying God's name. Ultimately, we wait for the day when God will make a metaphysical change in the world, where there will be a spirit where all humanity will believe in one God. Then God, we believe, will end exile, and all nations will serve God in harmony. The wolf and the sheep will rest together. And with the United Nations, there's called the Isaiah Wall. Right across the United, it says, where the wolf and the sheep will rest together, and they will beat the swords into plowshares. We believe in that future. At that time, we believe all nations will come together and serve God. Not that the nations will become Jewish. It will just be that all the nations will serve God. At that time, God will return us, and God himself, without any human intervention, will rebuild the temple. That will be the pinnacle of our sanctifying God's name with our lives, because it will be the revelation of God throughout the world. That's the 101 of Judaism, that basically we are Jews to serve God, uphold the law, not to rebel against nations, not to return and create a Jewish sovereignty. But we do pray for a day when God will make this change in the world, where all humanity will serve God and God will build a temple. This was viewed by the Muslim people throughout history as a fact of the difference of religion between Judaism and Islam. They have a distinctly different concept of who the Messiah will be, the prophets, the end of time. There's a Muslim belief, there's a Jewish belief. But that was never an impediment of coexistence. Even though we yearned to return and God should build a temple, it didn't bother the Muslim nations, and they took in the Jewish people. We were able to coexist because they understood that we as Jews will never attempt to take a gun and take over the land. That's forbidden for us. So we had this coexistence. Now, Zionism is a transformation of this subservience to God, of this Judaism as a religion, this upholding of the covenant, into basic nationalism. A group of people came, non-religious Jews. They weren't upholding the basics, the Ten Commandments, Sabbath, or kosher, all the basic laws of Judaism. They were just a group of people who decided for their own convenience to create a national home. But in order to gain legitimacy, respectability, and acceptance in the world, they said this is a Jewish state. They're following God's command to return to the land and establish a Jewish sovereignty. Although it's clear that it's not Jewish sovereignty, Judaism is expressly forbidden to do that, but they ignore what it says in the Torah. They don't really care. They don't feel constrained by anything that God says. And they just came along and they said they'll be able to sell this to the world, to the evangelistic Christians, to the world, Jews who are non-religious, who are ignorant of the religion. So they turn around and they said, hey, this is what God promised us, the promised land. They use the Star of David. They use the name Israel. They're going, and we're the children of Israel, returning to the land of Israel with the dream that and the prayers what Jews look for. So they made an ersatz Judaism, a nationalism, that they're going to create a homeland basically void of God. You don't have to keep the Sabbath. Everything happens on the cars go and come on the Sabbath. They declare their democracy. Judaism is not a democracy. Judaism is that you have to observe the Torah. But they're a democracy, and they're coming along and they're declaring this is the Jewish land. So it's an ersatz Judaism. It's diametrically opposite of the subservience to God and the upholding of the covenant of the Torah. So in essence, it's totally contradictory to Judaism. On top of that, if you'll ask them, why are you making this land? They'll say, we're making the land because we have to have protection. What are you talking about? We're suffering so many hundreds of years in Europe. We have to have a safe haven, a land to protect us, an insurance policy, they call it. So we say to them, what do you mean? God is our insurance. God is our protector. God is the one who we look to for protection. So they say, where was God when the Inquisition? Where was God? They laugh at us. They scorn us. They ridicule the religious Jew. So they basically, their core element is scorn and is a blasphemy and heresy. They laugh at the whole concept that you look to God for protection, that God is the ruler of the world. So it's rooted in heresy. The whole concept of Zionism, although they're calling it a Jewish state, but it's rooted in heresy. You'll ask any of the Zionists, they right away say, where was God to protect us? So they're belittling the powers of God. And they say they have to have a gun. That's their protection. So basically, it's rooted in heresy, and it's rooted in totally ignoring what Judaism is, that it's a covenant. Now, it also ignores the oaths that I mentioned, that when we were sent into exile, we are under 3 oaths of God, not to return. God foresaw there'll be people who'll be impatient and they'll want to create their own sovereignty. So God warned us. It was the prophecy of King Solomon. He said, there will come a time there'll be a destruction of the. King Solomon built the first temple. And he said, when he built it, he wrote a prophecy in Shir Hashirim, Song of Songs. He says that when God is going to send you into exile, do not, 3 oaths, do not return en masse, don't return in large numbers, don't rebel against any nation, don't make any attempt to end exile. So when the Zionists come along and they decide to create this Jewish state, they're rebelling, they're breaching all the oaths of exile. They're returning en masse. They insist that everybody should come up and they're making a nation. We're clearly against the oath of not returning en masse. Secondly, against the oath that you should not rebel against any nation. They rebel against all the nations over there, the Palestinian people and so forth. And thirdly, they're calling themselves the beginning of redemption. They always refer to themselves, in Hebrew it's called the Karta de Geula, beginning of redemption. Well, God tells us, do not attempt to leave exile. So they say they're the beginning of redemption. They're leaving exile. So in every shape and form, Zionism is the contradiction to every concept of what Judaism is and to all the laws of Judaism, because as Jews, we are forbidden since 2,000 years ago to create a Jewish homeland, not only not in Palestine, but in any place of the land. 1 centimeter, 1 inch of Jewish sovereignty is forbidden. That's why we never did it. We had, in our period, 2,000 years, it was called the Golden Age of Judaism. There was Jews who could afford to buy a piece of land. We never did that because it's forbidden for us. We're in exile, not because we're physically weak, we believe. It's because God wants us to be dispersed amongst the nations and not to establish a Jewish sovereignty. It's like a medicine. It's a bitter medicine to break our haughtiness, to make us humble, and that we should be serving God. So the whole concept of establishing our own sovereignty, that is flies in the face is in breach of all this concept of exile that God wants of us. So therefore, we and the rabbis, we put out a book called The Rabbis Speak Out. It's a compilation of the major authorities of rabbis, which is tens of thousands of rabbis, but this is 130 years, a record of religious Jewish opposition to Zionism, where you find the compilation of all the major Torah authorities, the leaders of the world authorities from Jerusalem, in Romania, Hungary, Poland, Lithuania, anywhere you'd like. The leading authorities, each one in their style, spoke out and said, we are totally opposed to this occupation, to this concept of creating a Jewish state. And each one had their own style, and just to speak up. And even and then finally in 1947, right before the United Nations ratified the State of Israel, there was the rabbi of the Jewish community that was living in Palestine, because as individuals, we were allowed to live there as long as the nations, whoever in authority, let's say at that time it was the Ottoman Empire, permitted the Jews to live there. It was no problem. Just we're not allowed to return en masse. But there was a small Jewish community throughout history living there. And they happened to be the elite of Jewish society, because what would happen is, through the history, is rabbis who would retire would want to live off their old age in the Holy Land. We call it a Holy Land. It didn't lose its holiness, the land, even though, we don't have the temple and so forth. So old rabbis would go with a few students and live off their lives there. People wouldn't go there for business. It wasn't a very rich land, but it was, on the contrary, it was a very poor land. But as individuals, people will go. So it would usually be the rabbis who retired with a few students. So it became the Ivy League of Judaism that lived there. And these were very God-fearing Jews, and they were totally opposed when the Zionists came along and decided to move in from Europe. The community living there was a very God-fearing community, and they were totally opposed to the Zionism. So there was a rabbinate and chief rabbis over there. And one of the chief rabbis was Rabbi Dushinsky of blessed memory. And he was the head of the community there. And he pleaded with the United Nations in 1947. This is a year prior to the ratification of the state. And he said to the United Nations, he said, we furthermore wish to express our definite opposition to a Jewish state in any part of Palestine. This was July 16, 1947, the declaration before the United Nations. And this was the opinion of the Jews living there. We don't want this Jewish state. It's not a Jewish state. They were talking prior to seeing the problems of what will happen, that will come out of this state, the killing and the bloodshed and so forth, that they stood up. He passed on. The next chief rabbi we took up, it's a lifetime position. We had an O2, we had a chief rabbi. You could see tens of thousands of Jews in the streets of Jerusalem. This is the community that's still there, this community. They're living there. They're anti-Zionist, anti the whole concept of the state. It's like a dual community. There's two cities, what do they call it? That what you would call two villages. There's one that's the Zionist, and then there's the ones who just simply never accepted Zionism. They get arrested because they refuse to serve in the army, because mandatory service. You can see pictures. They constantly demonstrate. They get beaten. Children get beaten. Old men. They get assassinated. We have a list of rabbis from the 1920s already who stood up and opposing Zionism, and they were murdered. This is something that you can see, and if this would happen in any other country, it would be a scandal. Their army, we're not talking about police, this is the army, simply because Jews are demonstrating constantly against their authority, that claiming, they have no right to be there, and they get brutally beaten, they get trampled with horses, with cars, they drive into them with impunity. They get sprayed with this Columbia University. I don't know if it was a scandal. Two students, Israelis, came and they sprayed them. This with impunity. They spray the Jews over there with this stink water, these chemicals, to discourage demonstrations because it ruins their clothes and their poor communities. And this is on and on and on. We have this position of Judaism, and something to note. We always lived together. Jews and Muslims lived together in the same courtyards. Prior to the Zionists coming up to Palestine, we had that Jewish community living there. The largest community were Muslims. There was a Christian community that was the second largest community, and there was a Jewish community, this God-fearing community, very religious, and they lived together. They had no problems with the Muslims, and they babysat each other's children. It was a peaceful coexistence. But why? Because the Muslims didn't look at the Jews as a threat to them. We were not aspiring for any authority. In the 1920s, by the way, the chief rabbi was Rabbi Sonnenfeld, and he met with the king of Transjordan, the emir of Transjordan, and also conveyed the will of the Jewish people that we have no aspiration to take over the land. In 1948, this shows Ben Zion, he was one of the heads of the Sephardic community, and here he's going with a white flag to give over the Jewish community of the old city of Judah, of the Jewish quarters of the old city, and he's giving them over with a white flag to the Jordanians. Now, the Zionists wanted them to take up arms and fight with them, but they refused. So he went out, and the Zionist shot, and he had a bullet in his leg his whole life. The Zionists actually assassinated our rabbis, and this is the history that we have of what Judaism is and what Judaism was. So till today, you will find in the very religious communities, invariably, if you go to Jerusalem, Mea Shearim, the very religious community that is still living there, you will find that they are living there. They had representatives in the PLO, and they saw, but basically the Jewish community was constantly standing up and pleading with the world media that they should be listened to and respected. Here it is. This is what I was looking for. They have Palestinian flags on the buildings. This is a Mea Shearim. You can even see occasionally we have pictures of women. They don't go out and demonstrate. And then you can see here, stop. This is in the streets of Jerusalem. Stop Zionist terrorist massacre in Gaza. So this is basically marching on the street with sackcloth. This is all in Jerusalem with Palestinian flags. This is the position held by the very religious community in the core of Jerusalem. And always demonstrations get attacked. Tens of thousands of Jews they're always demonstrating. And of course, this is our communities in the United States, the very religious communities. Here's in front of the White House when Netanyahu came to visit with President Obama. You can see Israel has no right to rule of any part of Palestine. Bibi Netanyahu and the state of Israel does not represent world Jewry. Basically, invariably, till today, wherever you go, the very religious communities, because we're very religious Jews, we are in total opposition, not only to what's happening in Gaza, the beyond words, the satanic genocide, the torture and everything, but the 76 years of occupation, which was also murder and torture and oppression, that they've done. We stood in opposition, and the Jewish people never accept. We don't have any Israeli flags. The largest community outside of Jerusalem is in New York, right across from Manhattan, the largest concentration of religious Jews, Williamsburg, Brooklyn. It's right across from Manhattan. And there's not one Israeli flag. You'll see everybody very religious. They give their lives for the religion. And if it would be something that's critical to Judaism, we would be supporting Zionism in the state. If that would be something that God needs of us, then we would be the first to be there because we give our lives. We have private schooling, large families. It costs fortunes. Kosher, dress, it costs fortune. We give our lives to our religion. Yet there's not one Israeli flag there. Why? Because we oppose it. Because we are Jews. Because this is totally contrary to our religion, to kill, to steal. And we cry, we hurt with the suffering of the Palestinian people. We're standing by and watching this murder. I mean, that's beyond words. And the people that was good to the Jewish people, we have many members of our communities that lived in Jerusalem and lived amongst the Palestinians, amongst the Arabs. And our rabbis teach us that we are required to repay good for good done. You're supposed to, always be grateful and show appreciation, good done to you. How dare the Zionists come along in order to justify, in order to tell the world they have a right to take the land? They say the ones who are opposing them, it's because they're anti-Semitic. So they use the claim that they hate the Jews and they're like the Nazis. How dare they say that when we know that they took us in. The Ottoman Empire took the Jews in, and we were able to they establish, and even after Hitler, it was Jews. We were embraced by Muslim countries, by the Second World War, and before that by the Crusades, by the Inquisition. We were embraced by the Palestinian and the Arab and the Muslim people around the world, even though we have a distinctly different religion. Now the Zionists come along and they vilify the Muslims and they hate the Jews, and that's why they don't want the Jews in Palestine. There could be nothing more abhorrent, than that. So besides the oaths of the Torah, but they combine that with accusations of anti-Semitism, and that the people who are opposing us, simply there's an ingrained hate to Jews, and there's nothing further from the truth. So in every aspect, we stand in opposition and we cry and hurt with the people of Palestine, and we go on demonstrations around the world to plead, with the world leaders that they should respect the Jewish leadership, just like if you would want to do something about Christianity, you would respect the priests and the Pope. Or in Muslim Islam, you would respect the imams and sheikhs and ayatollahs. In Judaism, they're totally ignoring the voice of the Jews in Jerusalem who are living there for hundreds of years. You're ignoring the Jews who are the Torah authorities. The communities are the most distinguished and rabbinical Jewish communities in New York, and we're ignored. And of course, you're ignoring the suffering of the people of Palestine that has no justification. So we plead with the world leaders that they should, wake up and don't insult common sense, common logic, common understanding. How could you stand by and be silent at this murder, at this, at least, just 76 years is one thing. There's 10 months of murder that everybody sees minute to minute. So we plead with them, and we go out and demonstrate constantly. That's basically I try to condense it, but that's what I think you can, if you have any, now you can ask questions and so forth, and we'll try to answer with God's help.
Yeah, can you tell us about the start and development of Zionism?
Zionism actually is what would you say, a child of Reform Judaism. There was 300 years ago, a movement started in Europe called Reform Judaism. Today, it's very popular in the U.S. and even in a little in Europe, but the U.S. certainly, where they started to reform. Reform is exactly what it means, to reform, to change Judaism. Now, as I preface this with God's help, the Torah is some covenant that God gave us. So we can't change God's word. It's ridiculous. But they came along and they said they're going to reform it. And the first thing was with blasphemy. They say Moses made the Torah himself. You can pick and choose what you want from it. So they have a concept of taking what's convenient, and that's their new style of Judaism. So by us, it has no place, it has no authority, it's not legitimate at all, because you can't even change what it says in our Torah. It says even King Solomon, he was blessed with special wisdom by God, he had a special blessing of God, but yet our rabbis say he one letter of the Torah he could not change. In other words, it's godly given. And we have no right, and we have no authority to change one letter of the Torah. And we believe God is above time. The Torah is above the concept of time. So it's just as relevant today as it was by the giving on the time of the Torah. So, for instance, let's say the world changes, like there's new technology. Electric came about, and all the different issues of electricity. So we're not allowed to make a fire on the Sabbath, for instance, because to show respect that God created the world 6 days and the seventh He rested. So Jews are not allowed to drive in a car, anything else with electricity and so forth. We're not allowed to make a fire and put on a light. So when they made the concept of a light bulb and electricity, so the rabbis convened and discussed amongst themselves, what is the law in regard to Sabbath? Is that electricity? And so is electricity fire? And they decided we're not allowed to do open lights on Sabbath. We have to prepare it before the Sabbath, open the lights, whatever it may be, use a time clock or whatever it may be. So we never said that the laws of God changes. We have to conform to the laws of the Torah. Just an example of how we conform to them. Zionism, Reform Judaism comes along and they're going to change so our rabbis never get credence, and they totally disqualified Reform Judaism. Reform, after a while, went off the deep end. They stopped everything that was considered holy by Judaism, they dropped. And they just used some symbols of Judaism. They made a temple and they called themselves the ordained ministers and rabbis. So it's all a farce. And they just kept certain things. Yom Kippur, they come together, they do certain things. But some people felt it was too off the deep end, so they made conservative. That should be a little more conservative than reform. But it's not orthodoxy. Orthodoxy was the only thing that we consider. That means orthodox means that we keep the laws of Sabbath. We keep exactly the laws as God gave it us. So, but now the reform wanted that the people should have a way of being able to assimilate amongst the European high society. They felt they looked at us low second-class citizens and so forth. So they wanted they should be able to assimilate. They shaved their beards off, and they dressed like anybody else, and they tried to assimilate in high society. That was what Reform Judaism was attempting to do. They started making their temple the customs should be like in the churches. They brought in an organ. They did everything that they should seem to conform to. Our rabbis, of course, said that this is all unacceptable, and we are forbidden to go into a reformed temple and so forth. Now, for like a generation or two, this went on, and it became very popular amongst European Jews. And unfortunately, a lot of Jews stopped practicing the religion. So they became ignorant of the Jewish religion. Now, the Zionists was a movement that started, Theodor Herzl, like it started after like 50, 100 years after the beginning of reform. They were watching how assimilation didn't accomplish their goal. They saw that there was the Dreyfus trial, Captain Dreyfus, for instance. It was a captain in the French army, and he was accused of espionage. And there was some very astute editors, of writers and reporters in newspapers. I forgot who it was, the exact one of the special one. And they decided something's fishy here, and they delved into the subject. They started saying that he wasn't, that they just took him as a scapegoat because he was Jewish. And the newspapers started dealing, them debating this, and a lot of anti-Semitism swept up in the high society. People started calling Jews different, and so anyway, it was a very bad situation. So Theodor Herzl was at that time the father of Zionism, and they started saying, "See, assimilation is not the solution. We have to make our own state. We'll make our own country, our own home, a national home." So they didn't come off the concept of that they were yearning to return to God. It wasn't from Judaism that they were attempting. They were coming off this reform trip of Reform Judaism, and they were looking for something that should be convenient for them to have a national home that was driving them, but nothing to do with God. In fact, they were totally estranged from Judaism. Like the picture I was showing, the ones like Theodor, like the picture is Theodor Herzl when he did the Declaration of Independence in Independence Hall. You see Ben Gurion standing there at this momentous historic occasion of the Declaration of Independence, and they're making a Jewish state, mind you, right? It's calling the state of Israel. So you would think they would have a rabbi. The basic, like Netanyahu keeps on talking in the UN, wherever he goes, "Oh, God gave us the land." You're talking from God. God, it's going to stringent commandments. You're not allowed to desecrate the Sabbath. It's punishable by death in the Torah and so forth. Here they're making a Jewish state. You don't even see them covering their heads. You're talking how ridiculous a Jewish state, when a Jew is required, according to the law books of Judaism, a Jewish male is required to keep his head covered to show that we believe there's a God above us. And here they're making a Jewish state. Now, one of them, or maybe there is one covering his head, but you don't see it. And so and they're all shaved. There's not no rabbis. You're making if it would be a Christian state, you would see some priests up here, or the Pope. It would be a Muslim state. You would see some imam, somebody to say the blessing. This is the farce of what it's all. They made a new language called Ivrit, modern Hebrew. A Jewish state, the Jewish language, our prayer books, everything is written in Lashon Kodesh, the holy language. They're making a Jewish state. What was wrong with the language that all the Jewish books are written in? Because they detest God. They made a court system. Netanyahu is waiting to get charged in the court system, right? They have the Supreme Court, everything. That's blasphemy by Jews, because we have the Torah. It's a law system. It's forbidden for a Jew who has a conflict to go to outside of the Jewish law system because it's considered blasphemy. God's wisdom is not good enough for you. In other words, that's better. So here they're making a Jewish state, and they made another law system. They made a rabbinate, mind you, that's for window dressing. So they have a rabbinate and a rabbi. So when they want to punish the Arabs or wipe out their villages, they write it off. They make it kosher with the rabbinate. But that's all farce. So basically, but it's all Zionism is basically an offshoot of non-religious Jews who wanted to make a homeland, and they ignored the voice of the Torah authorities who said what you're doing is just as bad as Reform Judaism. You're rebelling against God just in another form. And it's expressly forbidden, as I said, because not only is it ignoring that God is, you have to be subservient and keep the laws of the Torah, but we're expressly forbidden to recreate a Jewish sovereignty, even 1 inch of a nationhood. And they're expressly breaching the law, these stringent oaths of God. And it says, we're warned by God that if you will attempt to leave exile, and King Solomon writes in his prophecy, then we will be hunted like animals. It will bring a catastrophic result, what the Arabs would call a nakba. So we consider it will bring catastrophic results, God forbid. So what they're doing is not only a help for Jewish people, we were warned as religious Jews, we believe that God rules the world, that it will bring severe, God forbid, severe punishment to the Jewish people if they will attempt to do what they're doing. And we do see that since the advent of Zionism, we've been suffering. And so it's just it's a calamity, and we're all suffering at the hands of Zionists. But again, they tell the world, oh, we're Jewish. They roll their eyes and they say, this is the land God gave us. So they're falsifying what Judaism is, and they have no morals of God, because they don't feel constrict by anything, by that they're under the hands of God. So therefore, they don't feel in any way that they have to reckon that God tells us, you're not allowed to do this. So one of moral thing is not to use somebody's identity, not to take somebody, and they're using the Jewish identity willfully, knowing that these guys are not ignorant. Netanyahu is not ignorant, and in Judaism, so they know that it's forbidden for us to make a state. Yet they're doing it because they know for them it's convenient. They'll get support from the evangelistic Christians, who say, oh, the children of Israel, yeah, we have to give them a land. And they're not affiliated Jews who say, yeah, we're suffering so much. They use emotions. We suffered so much. Oh, God, we're returning to the land of God. But they know what they're doing is simply hijacking the identity of a religion that we actually died for literally 2,000 years. Were burnt in the Inquisition, that they gave their lives not to drop the laws of the Torah, not to forsake God and His Torah. Even my grandparents, by Auschwitz, we died. There were people who had the opportunity to send their children to convents and to drop the religion. And they said rather they'll die, and they took them into the Auschwitz. They should die as Jews rather than they're going to live a life and not practice the religion. And we're proud of that. Because we believe our body serves our soul, and our soul is to serve God with the Torah. This is what we live and breathe for. And these guys come along and they drop everything, and simply for a convenient nationalist home. There's statements. We put out a book called Traditional Torah Opposition. Traditional Torah Opposition to Zion Historical Documents. We have documents of the rabbis all oppose Zionism from day one, but we also have, like here, this is a statement of Theodor Herzl, the father of Zionism, wrote in his diary, page 14, he said, the way to solve the problem of anti-Semitism is to speak to the head priest of Vienna. He was living in Vienna, Austria. And this was, again, we're talking in the 1890s, before then even. And he wrote in his diary, the way to solve the problem of anti-Semitism is to speak to the head priest of Vienna to get an appointment with the Pope to make a mass conversion of all the Jews of Austria to Catholicism. That's his solution. This is the father of Zionism. It should be done on a Sunday in the middle of the day with music and pride publicly. We are the last generation that held on to the faith of our forefathers. The conversion would be in St. Stephen's Cathedral. Just like his mind, it's not even just passing thought. He thought about it to be with music and pride publicly, and his children dropped out of the Jewish religion. They converted out of the Judaism. And this is the hero of Zionism. Just get an idea. There's nothing to do with religion. It's a farce. And you have Jabotinsky, who was the head of revisionist Zionism, and he was the mentor of Menachem Begin, and he was also one of the fathers of Zionism. And he wrote proudly in Haaretz newspaper, which Haaretz but Haaretz is an old newspaper. This was in 1919, way before they had the state. And he wrote an article, openly, unabashedly, he wrote, in the national home, we will announce that those Jews who have on themselves the rust of exile and they refuse to shave off their beards and earlocks will be second-class citizens and not have the right to vote. Jews who refuse to shave off their beards will be second-class citizens. There was a rabbi who quoted him before, but he didn't say who said it. He said, who said the statement that the people who have beards should not? So I said, Nazis wrote that. Said, not the Nazis. This is Jabotinsky who wrote that. They're going to make the land and Jews who have beards should not have the right to vote. Imagine, this is the heroes of Judaism, the ones who are going to save the Jewish people. I'll just quote one more. I mean, you have the first president of Israel was Chaim Weizmann. And he was pivotal in that they should create the state. The Balfour Declaration was all because he was a scientist and he helped Britain with some inventions of like dynamite or something, and they helped them out, and they promised to reward him. And he said, I don't need a reward, just help us make a state, a Jewish state. And anyway, so he was pivotal in helping create the state, and the Britain should help them give it the state. They had a discussion in the 1930s about this. There was writing on the wall then, we saw that the Jews were being murdered, the hate against the Jews, there were pogroms by the Nazis and so forth, and they saw it's terrible for the Jews. So there was meetings of Jews, how they can help the Jewish people, save them. And one of the meetings were the Zionists. They were very rich at the time. They were a very influential group at the Zionists in the 1930s. And of course, the religious communities ostracized them. But they were a powerful group. So they had this meeting, and he spoke, and this is quoted many places, but one of the places that we quoted from the Jewish Press, which is a Zionist paper, October 1802, and he writes like this: Palestine, they had a meeting, and this is what he stated there: Palestine cannot absorb the Jews of Europe. We want only the best of Jewish youth to come to us. We want only the educated to enter Palestine for the purpose of increasing its culture. We want only the best. He meant doctors and lawyers, not educated in rabbinical colleges. He said, we want only the best of Jewish youth to come. We want only the educated to enter Palestine for the purpose of increasing its culture. The other Jews will have to stay where they are and face whatever fate awaits them. These millions of Jews are dust on the wheels of history and may have to be blown away. We don't want them pouring into Palestine. We don't want Tel Aviv to become another low-grade ghetto. It's beyond comprehension. This is the fathers of Zionism. It's, in other words, here it is, by the way, the Haaretz, October 22nd, 1919 was the Jabotinsky's letter. But anyways, this is Zionists. They hate the Jews. They said millions of Jews should die. They only wanted that. And when it came to saving the Jews, the Yitzchak Greenbaum, the head of the UJA, the Jewish Agents Rescue Committee, said, they asked me, could you give money out of the UJA, United Jewish Appeal, for the rescue of Jews in Europe? And I said, no. I say again, no. We should resist this wave which pushes the Zionist activities to secondary importance. I let them say I'm anti-Semitic. Let them say what they want. I will not demand that the Jewish agency allocates a sum of 300,000 or 100,000 pounds sterling to help European Jewry. I think that whoever demands such a thing is performing an anti-Zionist act. In other words, let them die. You're giving money from Zionism is more important. So this is the fathers of Zionism, just get an inkling of what we're talking about. Yet to the world, they keep on saying, oh, what Holocaust. They're the patrons of the Holocaust. They're the ones who are using the Holocaust as a tool to intimidate, and that, that you should support the state of Israel because of the Holocaust. When they were the ones who were hands are sullied with the blood of Jews, a lot of times that they stopped Jews from being saved, and they actually colluded with the Nazis at the beginning. They wanted Jews to go to out of Europe, that the Zionist Jews, and they helped. So they worked together with the Nazis, but that's a whole other issue. They worked at the beginning. The Nazis closed down all newspapers except the Zionist newspapers, because the Zionists said, yes, throw out the Jews and send them to Palestine. The ones who they wanted from Germany, who were mostly non-religious, they were Reform Jews. They were hand in glove that worked together with their plan of building up Palestine. So they wanted those Jews to go to Palestine, and at that time they'll be able to build up their national home. So I mean, in every facet, these are they use the attack of anti-Semitic. If you oppose them, you're anti-Semitic, even though it's not Judaism. And by doing so, there's two issues that when they do that, they are making cheap the word of anti-Semitism. Because a person knows that Jews died, were murdered, 6 million Jews and so forth were murdered. And if you speak up against a Jew, today people are very sensitive to that. And they know you can't do that because we watched how people were murdered. But all of a sudden, you're watching people committing a crime, atrocities. And if you speak up against them, you're accused of being anti-Semitic. They've totally made valueless the charge of anti-Semitism. They are worth nothing. They cheapened it. And not only they cheapened it, but people are starting to question in their minds, if this is called anti-Semitism, then maybe when people charged against Jews at the time of the Holocaust, maybe they were also right. They're totally sullying the ashes of my grandparents who were killed in Auschwitz. It's beyond words. Besides which, we call them the personification of anti-Semitism, because they're killing people, and they're also exacerbating anti-Semitism around the world. People are looking at Jews and saying, this is what a Jew is. So, and they equate Judaism with Zionism, because that's what Zionism wants. They could, and therefore they're making people hate Jews.
Why do you think the Zionists chose Palestine to colonize?
Simply, it was very simple. They had a meeting in Basel, Switzerland, in the 1890s, and they first wanted, again, they had nothing with God. So they were looking for a very rich, lush land, a productive land. In those days, you didn't have technology like you have today. So you looked for a lush land. They wanted to go to Uganda, to Patagonia. They had all these places that they were seriously thinking of creating their state. But then they decided practically, if they'll go to Palestine, to create a country, you need massive support. And they'll go to Palestine, they'll be able to turn to the Christians, evangelistic Christians, and they'll get a lot of, which is fine today. The Christians are in numbers much more than the Jews, who are supporting the state of Israel. And they're blindly supporting them because in their belief, that the Jewish people or the children of Israel have to go there, and it's a blessing for the Christians if they have the Jewish people go there. I'm not going to get into the Armageddon, and then a lot of people are questioning that their belief really is that Jews will have to convert to Christianity eventually, according to their belief. But even if you won't accuse them of that, that they're using the sympathy of people, and because they believe that Jews should be the children of Israel in the land of Israel. So they knew they'll be able to turn. And again, the Jews, many Jews who became Reform Jews, who are ignorant of the religion, they use their emotions. That the Jews say, oh, we always say the coming year in Jerusalem, ignoring the fact that if anybody knows the religion, we are forbidden to do what they're doing. We're forbidden to have a state. When we say the coming year in Jerusalem, we mean when God will make that miracle in the world, where all humanity will serve God. But they use this lack of knowledge, this ignorance, and the emotions of Jews who suffered so much, and they used that, so they decided to go to Palestine and create their state.
You had mentioned how how the early Zionists picked Palestine in large part because of the support that they would get from the Christian community. Could you tell us a bit more about the Christian community's relationship to Zionism and what they get out of it?
Yeah, well, first of all, many people are upset because because they say, well, first help the mighty again. I should convey his message. God's the Christian community, they have a belief of Armageddon, and there's a book concept of that the Jews and Muslims will go up to the Holy Land, and then there will be a war, and either people will convert to Christianity or they'll get killed, and that's like to bring the end of time, usher in the end of time, or something like that concept. So people are very actually upset that the Zionists turn so much to the Christian community for support, which there is a very, very massive amount of support. In fact, just 2 weeks ago, I think it was, or last week, what was it? There was the in Maryland. I think I'm trying to remember. 2 weeks ago. Yeah. 2 weeks ago, they have once a year they have this tremendously large conference where for the support of John Hagee and whatever this is, like the support for Christian support for the state of Israel, and they give almost like you'd say really blind support for them, and they're just. And we have every year we go out there. There used to be in Washington Convention Center. We would go and stand there for days and attempt to speak to the people that are going into the convention center. We'd stand outside and try to speak some basic logic and explain to these people that what are you doing? You're watching Palestinian people suffering, and that it's totally not Jewish, and then obviously they're not very knowledgeable about the Jewish religion because they're Christians, and I would try to explain that they're really being misled. And we'd stand there for 3 days. Usually they have this conference, and it's in the heat, and usually it's really brewing heat. And anyway, but sometimes we could get through to some very, very sparingly, a person here, a person there. But unfortunately, it goes on, that support. So the Zionists enjoy this tremendous amount of support. Now, as I was saying, so some people complain that why do they take money from the Christians, which we're talking about millions and hundreds of millions of dollars. Why are they taking that when you know that really at the end of the day they want a very, very black end, that it should be God for the Jews killing getting killed or something. Well, so but a lot of the people say that, and a lot of the Christians don't really mean that. I mean, there's a lot of them that really, mean well, and they just want to have support for the Jews. And as I was mentioning, they look at the Jewish suffering by Hitler, that the world was silent, and a lot of the world has this issue of guilt, that the world was truly silent when Jews were suffering, and it could have been a lot could have been done, and they refused entry to Jews in many ports, even into the United States, and therefore they want to somehow make good by being in support for this Jewish state. Now, so we try to explain to them that it's a really, really big mistake. That on the contrary, it's very ironic. Not only are you not helping, but you're making you're reawakening anti-Semitism by the support of this state, and it's really wrong. And it's not good for the Jews. It's not good for anything that you do against God is not good, obviously. And the people are dying because of that. It's killing people, and it's actually also oppressing the Jewish people, and so forth and so on. I know all the aspects and all the reasons that I've mentioned before. It's just wrong. You're not doing a good deed by supporting it. We try, but there are many people, like I like to say, that the Zionists have two weapons, almost nuclear weapons. One weapon is they use the Bible as say that it's theirs because God gave it to us, and therefore they have the right to the land. And the second one is that they use a weapon that's called anti-Semitism. That if anybody wants to speak up, you are an anti-Semite. And on both points, it's totally false. It's not Judaism. It's clearly not Judaism. It's against Judaism. And the attack of anti-Semitism, as I said, they cause the exacerbation of anti-Semitism. It's so obvious. It's so obvious. You go to any state in the United States, everybody admits that according to the actions that emanate from the state, you see immediately the statistically the amount of anti-Semitic attacks rises, percentage-wise, and you see, and especially now in these 10 months, and they say so. They say it's look that it is actions, anti-Semitic actions is coming. We have to do something about this. Well, use your sense, use your logic. I mean, political leaders. Don't you realize it's because you're supporting Zionism? And while Jews who are very religious are pleading and yelling and begging and saying that you don't equate Judaism with Zionism and stop supporting a pure evil and oppression of people. So this is what we are witnessing, basically. It's horrific. It's tragic. It would be a comedy if it wouldn't, to see this dumbing down of society and silently watching everything that's happening and following like sheep. The leaders, that what they're saying, that you have to, you throw students out of the universities, you suspend them, you take tenure away from us. It would be like like a funny show if it wouldn't be so tragic.
Why do you think so many countries are in favor of Israel?
Again, again, there's the aspect of people around the world. There are many good people. People have good hearts, and they watch the Jewish suffering by the Holocaust. They equate and they confuse the two, Judaism and Zionism. They felt that the world was silent, that the Jews should have a homeland, have their little piece of land, and the narrative was. There was one microphone till relatively recently, the mainstream news was in the hands of the Zionists, and nobody really knew what was happening in Palestine. And the Zionists kept on reporting to the mainstream media that there's just a bunch of camel riding backward people who just don't accept and don't want to accept another people coming into a vast empty land. The narrative was a land without a people for a people without a land, that it's an empty land, and it's just these people who are evil. They don't like to want another people to enjoy a little peace. So and of course since then the times have changed, and there's the internet. But the mainstream media is still under that, almost entirely still under that powerful intimidation and clutches of Zionism. They still insist on reporting the news as if the Palestinians are evil and the Muslims are evil, and the Zionists are simply fighting for their lives. And the ones who are standing in a position are unjust, So it's really terrible. But the internet and like shows like yours and whatever you're doing, it gives the opportunity that people are able to see the truth, and that's why you find the youth is standing up at the cost of their futures. They're getting thrown out of youth. I just went to testify for a student who was being suspended, and I've been doing this for years now. I've been standing up for imams who they want to throw them out of the U.S. We constantly try. I went as far as South Africa. We went around the world and to England to help people who are being charged with anti-Semitism, and it's the craziest charges, because these people are good and people and with good hearts and have friends, Jewish people, for so long, and it's just this blind attack called anti-Semitism. It's like I say, it's a nuclear weapon of the Zionists. And the countries, as I say, as a general rule, it's the politicians, the leaders, that they're afraid that they're going to be. Some of them are well-meaning. Others are afraid they're going to be labeled anti-Semitic, and they're afraid of the votes and so forth. Thank God, the grassroots, I think the streets now, the people, the grassroots, the students, and they are starting to awaken and realize that they're being duped, they're being misled. Now, this is, when you look at it with a good light, and I'm trying to say that, most people have good hearts. There are, of course, many people who supported the state as simply because it's very good for the weapons manufacturers to test their weapons. and then like the West wanted to have a stable community that they could feel that they could communicate with to balance out against the Arabs who had the oil and so forth. I mean, I don't want to be, to think bad about people. That there was obviously other intentions here also by other people. But even on the best of cases, the best scenarios that the people are meaning well, that does not justify, and we dare not be silent at this terrible evil that is being perpetrated against the people of Palestine and against the Jews.
Do you think that anti-Semitism has given people a legitimate reason to want a Jewish state? That a Jewish state could actually provide safety and security for Jewish people?
With the help of the Almighty, first of all, I'm a believer in God. We believe in God, and He rules the world. So if you go against God, like it says in the Torah, it says, "Why are you rebelling against me? You will not be successful." Doing something that is wrong according to God will not bring safety and protection. So it says clearly in the Torah, God says, if you'll try to leave exile, you'll try to make your own nationalism, you will be hunted like animals. It will be bad for the Jewish people. Zionism was well before the state, before the Holocaust, and many rabbis said we were not that Zionism. They tried to create a movement to leave exile, and what happened was like 50 years later, the Nazis came and they humped the Jews like animals, and we waited to lampshades and to bars of soap and everything. So a lot of said it was like a punishment. One of the reasons of the punishment of God, it could be attributed to this, and is attributed to their trying to leave exile. Could it be protection? According to spiritual, like I say, no, it cannot be protection because it's clearly against God. And all the reasons, even if it would have been in an uninhabited land, because we can't leave exile, and certainly you can't do it by killing and stealing against another people or oppressing another people. It's all wrong, so it can't be. But even according to, but if you just put all these reasons aside of God, but even logically, I mean, we have Jewish people living amongst other nations that we are basically living in England, in the United States, and all these places. It's much more logical that you can live in peace when you're not trying to steal a land from a people. When you try to make a land by stealing the homes from another people, and in a community, surrounded by people who consider themselves brothers and sisters with that community. I mean, it is the most illogical thing to do, and concentrating people into one small area at the time when you have missiles and bombs is the most horrific and the most ridiculous and the most dangerous thing to do if you're looking for protection, where you should be spread out. And even in the Torah, it says Jacob took his family when he was he was afraid of his brother Esau. He divided them into camps, that they should be spread out. And I mean, so it's all wrong. But I look at God and see that the way we should do. So it's against God to kill and steal. Simply, it's against God to make a state. It's against God to kill and steal. So it can't be a protection. But it's like I say, in every facet, every way you look at it, it's illogical. And from one side of the mouth, they'll say, we have to have a safe haven. And the other side, they say, it's a danger. Iran could throw a nuclear bomb on us. So, I mean, if you're talking there's a nuclear bomb, which is so dangerous, then wouldn't you think it would be better that you would be spread out through the world? Then it's in every, and then, of course, look, if you're going to look logically also, statistically, how many people, the Arabs have large families. The Jewish people also, who are anti-Zionists, have large families. We're not allowed to have family planning. So, while the Zionists have small families, in statistical-wise, we know percentage-wise, they're going to be outnumbered down the road, whether it's 30 years, 50 years from now, maybe if you work it out. I don't know exactly the numbers. It was plenty of times. They even say that Sharon and that they gave up the whole Gaza was because they realized that they're going to give them regular voting rights, and they're going to vote. They're going to be the majority is going to be the Muslims. They decided it's more practical and convenient. Just cut that off. That whole 2.5 million people over there, So I mean, it's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. How are they going to stop being outnumbered by the Palestinian people? And what are you going to say? They're not going to have a right to vote. They're going to be second-class citizens. The world can never accept that. So how are you going to stop the fact that they're going to have that they're going to go to elections and they're going to have a Palestinian president and prime minister? What are they going to do then? I mean, it is so ridiculous. It is so wrong. So what's Netanyahu's solution? To bomb them to death, to wipe out the whole Palestine? I mean, that's what the route they're going. I mean, it's people say it's inhumane. We say it's ungodly. It's against God. This whole thing is against God. It defies logic, and it's against God.
With Zionism and the establishment of the modern state of Israel, setting up Jewish people to be either victims of anti-Semitism through being included in the crimes of Israel, or Jewish people in Israel set up to be the enemies of all of their neighbors, and of course the Zionists and such setting up the Israeli Jews to be against and the enemies of God. Who benefits from Zionism?
When they made the state, like I say, they're driven by Satan. It's a satanic thing. It defies logic. It's against logic. But most probably in their dreams, when they were making that state, they most probably felt they'll be able to take over the whole land. Most probably that was a plan, and therefore they'll be successful. I mean, I can't go into the minds of these people. I don't want to go there anyway. I'm going to get too dirty if I go into their minds. But basically, like I say, if you sit down and see, it's illogical. I mean, basic logic. I said as far as numbers, unless, like I say, that they felt they're going to be able to totally almost totally eradicate the people that were living there and so forth. And the fathers, they had this concept they'll be able to have it. As far as the fear of anti-Semitism and so forth. They looked at themselves as a Western country that they were not. They're going to throw. They were totally trying to eradicate the religion. You would go through the history of what they tried to do to the religious communities, they did everything they could to eradicate the religion. They made their school systems that's really totally twisting all the stories of the Torah into nationalism, and every story they took in the Torah, they tried to make it as if it's a concept of national. The Maccabees, which they have a Maccabee Olympic team, and all these, instead of talking that they were rabbis who gave their lives to protect Jews, that the Greeks wanted to wipe out Judaism and everything, they made it into like military concepts, and they twisted and turned, and everything they did. David with Goliath, and David didn't get up to stand there only because it was a question of protecting a godliness and so forth. It was a wish of God. They took all the Torah, the stories of the Torah, and they totally misconstrued and twisted them. So it's and in that manner, they tried to secularize and make the country that it should be becoming a Western country. They shouldn't have to suffer from anti-Semitism in that manner. They'll be just part of the Western world. They felt they'll be joined together with the Western countries. Total nationalism, just like Canada, America. They're going to have this Western country. Anti-Semitism. What did they have with Judaism? They were going to drop this whole issue, but they were able to use it as a tool in order to convince the world that they should be supported, but not more. They didn't figure on, most probably in the long run, of the suffering that they're going to have all these countries around them that are going to be blocked, that are going to be able to stand up and continue to object to what they're doing. I mean, I mean, it's again, it defies logic, basically. But that's the way you have to look at it. They had America was a powerhouse, was the superpower. The Arabs didn't have a superpower as far as they were concerned. They were all weak, and they had the weapons and everything. The planes, all the most advanced weapon. This all came with the United States, and they were even able to deal with other superpowers also, with Russia and others. They were able to deal with them. While the Arabs had nothing. So their concept was probably at that time was they wouldn't have a problem. But and also they're ready to sacrifice on the altar of, when a person gets into an ambition and they're driving something, they were ready to sacrifice any lives that stood in their way, which they did to the Palestinian people and they did to Jews. They didn't care how many Jews died, as long as they can get, like I mentioned to you, the story that the Jews in Europe should die. Because they don't have morality, that morality of godly morality. They were ready that people should die as long as they realize their goal.
What was the spark that started you on this path of activism?
Well, with God's help, I mean, thank God, I come from a very religious family. My father, actually, a blessed memory, was in Europe well before the state of Israel, and one of the rabbis he was very close with was one of the greatest, a very holy man, Rabbi Shapiro, Rabbi Chaim Elazar Shapiro, a blessed memory, was called the Munkacharov. He was one of the strongest opponents of Zionism in Europe. So I was sent to institutions, Jewish religious institutions, that they were all anti-Zionist institutions. We grew up, it's a given, our communities were anti-Zionist. And that's part and parcel of our religious education. We went to demonstrations, I remember, even when I was a child. Later, after I graduated from, and I got married and so forth, and then we went to demonstrations, and I found people, some reporters asking questions, and other people didn't speak English that well, because now communities, it's more Yiddish, as Yiddish is the mother language of the Jewish communities from Europe, and they were struggling in answering. Not that they were not knowledgeable, but they were struggling in answering the reporters, while I somehow spoke English a little better, possibly. So I spoke to the reporters, and I became more involved in speaking to the reporters and speaking and trying to articulate, to explain, to clarify, to educate people about why our communities are in opposition to the state of Israel, its existence. That said, my father-in-law, blessed memory, said he remembers at the early days. He used to say to me, he told me, you think you got problems when you stand up there and the Zionists, threaten us and attack us. He remembers at the beginning, right at the beginning, he would go out in front of I think the United Nations or so. They would go out and demonstrate, and they feared for their lives from the attacks of the Zionists. I could just say there would be many, many more people who would be demonstrating, the hundreds of thousands, if it wouldn't be for the threats and the vicious attacks that the Zionists do to the Jewish people in Palestine, certainly in Jerusalem and around there. And they've assassinated rabbis. Even the chief rabbi of Palestine, they attempted to assassinate him, the one who moved to the United States. 1960s, 1950s. His name was Rabbi Teitelbaum, and I myself, we get death threats and so forth, and the synagogues get. If it would happen in any other place, we called hate crimes. People, they would find the attackers. My car was tires slashed, the windows broken, and on and on and on. Rabbis in Manchester, I have a rabbi, they shot into his window, and they never caught anybody. I mean, if it would be something against the Zionist community, they would catch people. But so it's just so people see that and they get fear. It's like an example. The Zionists know what they're doing. They just want to intimidate, and the people are afraid to speak up. But thank God, in our communities, we have thousands of people who do speak up and demonstrate.
What organizations are you currently with?
Well, as I said, I was very we looked as like one of the greatest rabbis of our time, the most outspoken, who was the chief rabbi of Palestine at the time in the 60s and 70s. His name was Rabbi, and the 50s, his name was Rabbi Yisroel Teitelbaum. He was called Satmar Rabbi. But beside, and he urged people to be very vocal against Zionism, and he has a lot of his followers in Jerusalem and around the world, in England, the U.S. Besides which, I became close with the leaders, rabbis who were part of the like Neturei Karta. Although it's a loose organization, it's not really like a card-carrying organization. It's ones that are very vocal against Zionism. But I had the privilege of being affiliated and close with some of the rabbis of that, and other just I could mention very great rabbis, Montevideo, Rav Kashever, big rabbis who were very vocal and very, very strongly opposed to Zionism, and supported and urged people to go out to be outspoken against Zionism. Now I'm like Neturei Karta. Neturei Karta was the name given to the ones very vocal in Jerusalem, protectors of the city, it means in Aramaic. And there was the Eid HaCharedis means God-fearing community. That is really the central, the center of the anti-Zionist community that was living for hundreds of years in Jerusalem. Eid HaCharedis, God-fearing community. And they were together with this rabbi, Rabbi Amram Blau of blessed memory, who was like the secretary, was the one of the voices and the leaders of the God-fearing community, Eid HaCharedis, and then he like branched off into their own because he was busy constantly speaking out and demonstrating against Zionism. This Rabbi Blau. There's many. Rabbi Amram Blau, and he died under very, very suspicious circumstances. He had a hernia, and he had to emergency go to the hospital there. The chief rabbi of Palestine, said he shouldn't go to an Israeli hospital. He was living in Jerusalem, but it was an emergency. He went in there, and a few hours later, they said he died of internal bleeding. And he was a strong man, a big person. It was unbelievable. But anyways, this was Rav Amram Blau. Rav Amram Blau had this Neturei Karta, and he's had a lot of followers. I mean, people who went along with that way that we should be very vocal against Zionism. And there are people around the world who are part of this Neturei Karta. And one of his students was somebody, Rabbi Moshe Dov Beck, of blessed memory, who passed away a few years ago. He wasn't actually in Europe. He was in the bunkers hidden from the Nazis in Budapest by the Second World War. And after the Second World War, he was a teenager. He then went to Italy, and from Italy they went up to Palestine. The ship, they were taken up to Palestine, and he went and joined the very religious communities, which was anti-Zionist, and became one of the very vocal spokespeople against Zionism, and decided to move away from the state, as many, many others did, because they didn't want to be on principle. They didn't want to be under the state of Israel. And he moved first to England, Canada, and then came to the US. And I became friendly with him in the United States, and I learned a lot from him. And he was like one of the leaders in the outspoken against Zionism. And I carry on from that with God's help.
What are some things you're proud that your community have done taking a stand against Zionism?
We're just proud in the fact that they're although we all came from almost entirely, our communities are immigrants who came from survivors from the Holocaust. The community is the vast majority are people of children, just as I am, from Holocaust survivors. And we rebuilt the Jewish life totally religious, even though it was extremely hard to start from scratch. And we did not fall prey to the Zionist influence that we should, just go ahead and support this, something that could be very seductive, that to have your nationhood and it looks good, and maybe and outwardly you may say, oh, that's a great thing, we're going to have our proud with an army and so forth. On the contrary, we stood, and even though with many hardships, we were able to build really our lives again, and still in all, we stood fast against Zionism, and are still standing fast against Zionism. And even though today, ironically, the intimidation, the attacks are from the Zionists more than from other people. I mean, what people are afraid of, the attacks of anti-Semitism is nothing compared to the attacks that we get from the Zionists. It's unbelievable, but that is a fact on the ground. If you go to the Holy Land, they get arrested. They get simply because they don't refuse to go in their army. They get beaten. They get oppressed in every shape and form. The whole life is a struggle. They have socialist medicine, but you have to sign that you are Israeli, that you support Israel, that you're an Israeli citizen or so. And so therefore they have a real struggle. They're poor communities where every time they have a child, a baby, they have to pay thousands of dollars. The lady goes to the hospital and she's ready to go home, and she's ready to take a baby home. They say, pay us a couple of thousand, their money over their shekels. And so she says, she doesn't have that money. All you have to do is sign your name. So it's an extremely hard test on on the spirituality of a person, yet they do it. And so we have special charities actually around the world that we give. It's called Keren Hatzolah. It's the fund to save, and that's basically to help support people who do not take money from Israel, and to pay for institutions that don't take money from Israel. But it's a struggle. And we try to remain true to God and to our Torah, and stand distance from Zionism and their influences and their institutions.
What would you say are some of the most common misconceptions about your support for Palestine, your cause in general?
Of course, the Zionists attack us brutally all the time, and they have newspapers, and they have every type of media outlet, and television and radio, and of course they accuse us of being heartless, and you can go through the litany of claims that we're a bunch of morons, we're a bunch of crazies, we're extremists, misled and so forth, and that it's a fringe group, and that it's only some wild fringe group who shares this view. The attacks go from every type, or self-hating Jews and so forth, and basically, Zionism is, the brutal in their attacks, or accusing us of not feeling for Jewish people, their suffering and so forth, and that or that we befriend killers and we want the death of Jews and so forth, and we celebrate the death of Jews. I mean, I've heard it all, and I'm not just saying theories. I've heard it all. I've heard on their broadcast, people bring to us where they say that people say they attest to witnesses that, let's say, my Rabbi Becker, blessed memory, that he said they heard him, and they could testify that they heard him say he celebrates when Jews are murdered. It's patently false. It's crazy. It's not true. It's repulsive. It's wrong, and it's not true. But basically, of course, our position is that, of course, we hurt with the suffering of the Palestinian people. We cry with them. I mean, we really hurt that. And we are humiliated and so forth. That it's, being done in our name and so forth. But on the contrary, first of all, it's the very religious communities around the world. It's not some wild fringe group. This is the religious outlook. It's the religious position held by all the distinguished rabbis that existed before World War II, and since World War II, in the very religious communities, they still continue to be anti-Zionist. Some of them are more vocal, depending what community, but it's not like a fringe, first of all. So everything that they say is just, just to disparage us and to disqualify our voice. That when people hear, they should not start, having some doubts about who to support. So they try to totally disqualify us and make us like with some type of evil entity, But in truth, as I say, if anybody would just take the time and effort, and they would go to the very distinguished religious communities that are simply adhering to the religion as we've done for all these hundreds of years and have not changed, Holocaust survivors, all our communities, you will find they're anti-Zionist. Some are more vocal, like I say, but the majority are not that vocal. They're simply afraid to be vocal. But you'll find that all over. So basically, that's that. And of course, we don't celebrate the death of Jews. On the contrary, our being vocal helps to dissipate, to take away anti-Semitism, because when I go to Arab and Muslim countries, I was just now in Qatar, I was by the funeral of Ismail Haniyeh, and it was broadcast. The Hamas wrote about it in their thing that rabbis came and they spoke about that. Then, and he kept on professing. I mean, I met with him when he was prime minister in Gaza. We brought medical aid to them, and he said, I am not against Jewish people. I'm not against the Jewish religion. I'm not against Jewish people. We want to live together. We simply don't want to be occupied. And this message gets to the, simple, farmer out over there. And because some of them could very well hate a Jew. And they tell us that. Many people come to us and they say, I won't apologize to you. We looked at a Jew and we hated them. And since we become aware that has nothing to do with Judaism, and there's Jewish people feel with us, our whole view has changed. People come with tears in their eyes. They cry. I've had it so many times. It's nothing new by me. That many, many people who are changed their views on the contrary. I mean, anybody with a simple logic, with a simple IQ, would understand that, if anything, we're saving Jewish lives. I mean, beside the fact what we're doing, and we're hoping to save the Palestinian people, but we're saving Jewish lives by taking away that hate against Jewish people that Zionism causes. I've even heard a lady who had the television, who had a show in Canada. She said she was contemplating becoming a suicide bomber. And this was a time when they were making a lot of buses, they were blowing up. She said, but then she changed it because she became aware that it's not every Jew. It's not, that a Jew is a hater of Palestine who wants to occupy. So, I mean, so on the contrary, if there's anybody who's anti-Semitic, and there's anybody who creates danger for Jewish people, who are the enemies of Jews, it's Zionism and their state of Israel. They are simple enemies of Jews. Besides, how many people are dying, even their soldiers? You go to a cemetery of theirs, how many soldiers died for a cause, a selfish, flawed political cause? We lived together prior to Zionism. How many people are dying for a simple, flawed, idiotic, political cause that's just, it's satanic?
How do you want people to see you and to see your mission and your cause?
Well, of course, we would love to, with God's help, that people should realize that they're being conned, that they're being duped, they're being misled by Zionism, and that they should return to the folds of the Torah. They should become Jews. They should practice religion, Judaism, and not Zionism. They should understand that Zionism is antithetical, that Zionism is contradictory, is forbidden according to Judaism. That's what we would hope and we yearn for. One day that will happen. It's only, tests every generations. There was always different tests, and this is one of the tests of today.
And you've also discussed previously about how, the Zionists are very prolific in their messaging and to smear you or to promote their own language. What is perhaps some of the most common pro-Zionist propaganda that you have to encounter?
That we are so extreme that because of our, like the most common, they say that it was so extreme, and now just because we believe that Zionism is not allowed, we're not allowed to have a state before the coming of the Messiah, which I explain that won't be a concept of a Zionist state. It will be a revelation of God, and then there will be a kingdom of David and so forth. But that will be with the will of all humanity anyway. But that was so opposed to what they're doing that we're ready. We became so twisted and extreme that we're ready to support the Palestinians should kill the Jews. That's the most common Zionist, that we're going out there with the enemies of the Jews who want to kill the Jews, which is, of course, it's vile. It's not true, but that's the most common Zionist attack, that we're going together with the enemies of the Jews. Of course, the enemies of the Jews are Zionism and their state. They're the ones who are causing bloodshed. Even like in the attack of October 7th, if you step back and you say, look, people should say, whoa, what am I doing here? So 76 years, every time we supported Zionism, and there was the Antifada, there was this, there was suicide bombers, and every time we had to buy into Zionism and said, yes, but the solution is to hammer more on the Palestinian people, to make it more harsh, the occupation, and you bought into that Zionist narrative. And what happened? More death and more death and more death. October 7th comes. You're holding people in what people call the largest open-air prison, Gaza, and you're keeping people occupied. And we're not talking about condoning violence, but an action brings a reaction. What do you expect when you're going to do this to a people where they have they didn't have enough medical aid, they didn't have enough food, they don't have enough. You're oppressing the people. If you would take Rhode Island away from the United States, China would come and somebody would come and say, look, you have so many states, we'll take just like one little piece for ourselves. What are you so selfish? What's going to happen? The whole America is going to stand up and oppose them. There'll be blood all over, right? And what do you expect? You took people and you oppressed them. You think there is going to be a response. So all of a sudden, October 7th, and something went wrong, radically wrong. I don't want to get into theories, but some people said that maybe some Netanyahu and these people ignored warnings, and because they wanted to have a war or whatever it may get into, and it's very possible because they don't have godly morals, and anything could happen. They can do anything. They're selfish for their issue. And maybe got out of hand. They wanted a little bit of action, whatever it is. But whatever it is, the reason people exploded out of those walls, and automatically things happen. So now people should step back and say, look, how many years more, how many more deaths of slow death, how many that we're going to continue to support this forced occupation of a people that leads to nowhere. It's terrible. It has no end to this black tunnel. Maybe we should step out of this box and start thinking of a different route, a different way. Jews live together. Jews and Muslims live together for hundreds of years in peace. We have people who can testify. We live together. Jews and Muslims live together. Anybody can testify the facts. I've spoken to old Arabs, to old Jews. They lived in the same courtyards. They babysat each other's children. It's no question that in every Arab and Muslim land, there were Jewish communities. And it was before there was human rights groups. And so even though we have a distinctly different religion, what was the cause of this rift and this hate and this mistrust and this bloodshed? The introduction of something foreign. It wasn't the tapestry, this beautiful tapestry of Jews, Muslims, and Christians. It was the introduction of an occupation, of a creation of a Zionist state of Israel. So we're seeing so much bloodshed. And you say this tragic that since World War II, there was never in one day such a killing. So let's step out and say, so what are you going to do? You're going to kill another 100,000, 200,000, 1 million people? So you're going to make from these million people, all the relatives are going to become enemies of you. They're going to become blood enemies of you. So it's going to only bring more bloodshed. Only if you were planned to really wipe out every single Palestinian and every Arab and their relatives in other countries. I mean, is that sensible? So instead of turning around after October 7th and say, enough is enough, we gave you enough chances to have with the Camp Y Accord, Camp David Accord, Camp this and that, and everything you did, and the Oslo Accord, nothing worked out. Let's step out of this box. And just like in apartheid went on for tens of years. And eventually they said, you can't do that. You can't have apartheid. And said, what's going to be? The blacks are going to murder all the whites, right? That's what they said. And thank God it didn't happen that way. So they should stay and say and turn and put the blame where it belongs. It is a Zionism. It's Zionism. It's not October 7th. Like the general in the United Nations, he said it didn't come out of a vacuum, and they said he should get fired, right? But he said what's truthful, what's logical, what's common sense. It's not October 7th. It's the occupation. Stop the occupation, and we'll return to that. Now, the United Nations ratified Israel. Like I say, that's satanic because it doesn't make sense. It's not logical. Why did they ratify to make a Jewish state when you automatically, that will bring a rift and a hate between others who are not that religion, especially the majority are not that religion. But let's just they went along with that. You're talking about and they're now, just because they did something, they also allowed apartheid to exist. And they gave the ambassadors from South Africa, they referred to them as His Excellency Ambassador this, and they went on and on and on. Apartheid, that every child today will tell you that discrimination against blacks is unacceptable, right? It's unacceptable. Yet they went on for tens of years, and whoever stood up against them was considered a terrorist. Nelson Mandela, 27 years he was in prison. And so finally, who stopped it? It was the politicians? No way. It was the grassroots who, like mosquitoes, who made them uncomfortable. And finally, on the pressure of so many people, they finally had to stop apartheid. And today, nobody will accept it. So you see, the United Nations could be making a mistake. Israel is a mistake. Israel is a mistake. Since 1948, they ratified, it was the works of Satan, they ratified something that's totally evil, totally wrong, that causes rivers of blood. October 7th, they should stand back and say, enough is enough. Let's think out of the box. Remove the impediment to peace, and then we can live together in peace. As I said, I met with the leaders of Hezbollah, I met with the leaders of Hamas, I met with the leaders of all the groups, I met with the leaders of Iran. I just came from Iran by the funeral of Raisi. Everybody says we're not against Jews, we're not against Jews. And everybody's saying it, and the history shows in Iran, they lived for hundreds of, till today, they have synagogues and openly, and nobody comes and destroys them. We can live together. And if everybody's saying they want to live together, they're saying it's only one thing, this introduction that somebody ratified and put on top of this community. So listen to them, remove it, and then we can live together in peace. That's what we're saying.
Let's say the occupation ends and Israel goes away. What happens to the Israelis, the large Jewish population in Palestine right now, without the state of Israel? What happens to them?
Well, with the help of the Almighty, I'm going to repeat one of our great rabbis, again, Rabbi Beck used to always, when they would ask him questions of what's the solution, he said, I'm reluctant to give a solution, because then if you'll disagree with me, then you'll say, well, maybe the concept and the whole thing that I'm explaining about Zionism is also wrong. So, okay. But he said, but in the truth, so he said, I'd like to separate these two issues. First, we have to recognize, just like a doctor, if he's going to prescribe cortisone, something for a hemorrhaging wound, he's a criminal, because he's just taking away the pain, and somebody walks out and thinks he's healthy, and in the meantime he's hemorrhaging, right? But so you have to diagnose the sickness in order to be able to give around. The sickness is Zionism. It's not the difference of religion. We coexisted with the difference of religion. We were taken in by the Muslim countries when we were being brutally killed in Europe, and we were embraced even though we have a difference of religion. We flourished amongst them. We put out our greatest rabbis in Muslim countries. It's not the problem of religion, a difference of religion. It's not a religious conflict like Zionism wants to portray this. The problem has to be recognized. It was the implementation of occupation of the Zionism of the state of Israel. Remove that, and we'll have, and that will be that is what has to be done ideally. Now you may say, well, it's a catch-22 now, because so many years of occupation, of brutality, people taken into prison and so forth, that the Palestinian people are going to go, God forbid, a massacre, God forbid, the Jews, if the occupation will stop. I disagree with that, because Again, it's not a bunch of wild men like the Zionists portray the Palestinian people. It's a people that have certain leaderships. There's under the Hamas. It's under the Palestinian Authority. These are educated. These are good people, and they want to live in peace. Everybody wants peace, and the leadership wants peace. Now, so if they would be like the leaderships would be saying, ideally, let's just talk that the people of Israel would come and they would say it was all wrong. We want to have a coexistence. We want a free Palestine. We want to live, and the leaders, they would discuss and they would speak to their people. We're going to try to attempt that we should be able to coexist. Now there are people who committed atrocities. The ones who commit, first of all, they would have to go and answer in court and so forth for the atrocities they committed. But let's just say that these tens of thousands of people will say we cannot live here because we feel our lives are threatened. So how many billions of dollars goes into Israel every single year? Now, what would be if they would take and count for year and year, how much money this is? If they would take these 10,000 people, 20,000 people who committed atrocities and say, okay, let them move to Canada, US, England, let them with funding. We should help them have homes, and they should be able to move to another country. And so all these people who feel a threat, they should be funded and helped to reestablish their lives in another country. And then the rest of the communities will be able to, with God's help, live together in a free society. Wouldn't that be logical?
Sounds so to me.
Sounds so to me. But it's this fear-mongering, this panic, this Zionist portrayal. They're going to drive us to the sea, from the river to the sea. They also say the same thing. They want Palestine. They don't call it West Bank. Yehuda and Shamron, they call it. They call it's all theirs. They could say it. Whenever they stand up, it's not anti-Semitism. When you hear their programs that they spew hate against the Palestinians, against Muslims, that's all fine. But when a Palestinian says one word and he says Jew instead of Zionism by mistake, oh, he's an anti-Semite, and they get thrown out of their jobs. And I personally witnessed, we go to encampments. I've gone to tens and tens of encampments we've gone through the last 10 months. And we see how the Zionists intimidate. They come in your face with the Israeli flags and they laugh at the people that would died. And then if they say one word back, oh, they're anti-Semitic. I see how they're acting. We're talking of intelligent college students who are standing out there in the cold and the wet, and they're simply trying to stand for the suffering of the Palestinian people. Yet they're labeled anti-Semitic. It's not true. And this is, so it's just the Zionist panic driving, the fear-mongering, and then they want to, when this is going to pass, people realize it's a mirage. It's just a false Zionist, game plan, not more.
You're traveling, protesting, speaking, educating. You're doing so much. So how do you avoid activist burnout?
It's a very good question. But, it's like all our Judaism. Judaism is a religion that, it's constantly, trying to do the will of the Almighty. And that's what's pushing us. And, we ask God for strength and that we should be able to keep on going. And that's it. We try.
How do you balance career, family, your interests, relationships, and activism?
Again, it's not easy. We have a lot of people in our communities. It's very hard. They give of themselves all the time because we feel it's the sanctification of God's name. And a Jewish person knows his life is to sanctify God. And we have a lot of examples, unfortunately, in the history back of people giving their lives. Like I say, my grandparents died for God, and they and we know what it means, and we try to do our best, and people give selflessly, and then their last. We're talking about poor families, and they give money for the trips, and they anything that we should be able to stand out. That we feel it's one of the essential issues that we have to have the world understand that it's not Judaism, it's not the Jewish people, and that we should stand out there and plead that they should stop killing the people in Palestine because it's unjust and it's nothing to do with they're doing an evil, doing something wrong. They're being vilified unjustly. So it's our obligation, and that's what pushes us, and we try to every free minute that we can. But Jewish people, I can tell you, you have no idea of the extent that we give of ourselves. First of all, many of the protests are on Sabbath, and that are done on Sabbath because it's the weekend. It's the best time for most people around the world. Now, for instance, in England, it's done in London in Trafalgar Square. Trafalgar Square is like Times Square in the US, right? That's the center. And they go there. Now, the Jewish community lives like 2.5, 3 hours away from there, the very religious community. But we're not allowed to use a car on the Sabbath. So we have people in their 70s, people old and young, walk in the cold, in the heat, in the rain, and everything. And they walk 2.5, 3 hours just to go to that protest. And then they'll walk back, and they can march for 3 hours. We have in New York, we have people going to Manhattan. They walk from Williamsburg, from our neighborhoods. It could be a 2.5, 3 hour walk, a 3.5 back, and a 3 hour march, and more sometimes. You wouldn't believe, and this goes on Sabbath after Sabbath, because especially these last 10 months, because of what's happening in Gaza. We've done it for 76 years, but usually it wasn't so many demonstrations on the Sabbath. And so I'll just give an example of how much they give of themselves tirelessly.
How has your perspective on the world changed since just within the past 10 months?
Well, I think, although, like it says from bitter, there's a saying in the Torah, or whatever, by King David, it says, from bitter comes out sweet. So basically, from this terrible, horrendous genocide, maybe something sweet is coming out, because the world started awakening and feeling that they can't be awakening, and people also till now, many people may be intimidated. They were afraid to speak up of the attacks of anti-Semitism, but they felt it's so bad already, it's so horrendous, that people felt they just can't be silent anymore, and they started demonstrating. And once you start demonstrating, thank God, more people will join, and you have so many students who are outspoken that for 76 years, we as Jews, my beard is white already till 120, God should give me strength, but we were demonstrating from my youth, I still remember, and there were very few non-Jews who were demonstrating with us. There were no Arabs. Later, when there was an attack on Lebanon, then was the first time we saw some Arab people coming out to the United Nations and demonstrating. And then we started joining together. But as a general rule, people do not speak up against the Zionists. And I think since these last 10 months, I think we're finding that people decided enough, and they're not going to be silent, and they're not buying into the Zionist narrative and their really vile propaganda and falsehood.
So for people who now feel that, they can't stay quiet anymore, they have to go out and help you, how do you suggest they get started?
With God's help, I mean, what can I say? I mean, thank God, there's plenty of organizations today that some of them that really young people they're not even from the old, there was organizations that are very good, Al-Alda, that means right of return, and there's many organizations that were outspoken. But lately there's AMP, American Muslims of Palestine, but then students, in many schools and so. But lately they open new different organizations that they're so new, they don't even know us. They don't even know, the old demonstrators. Like we come and they don't begin to know. They look at us, who are you? And we think, wow, and these are young generations. But so there's plenty within our lifetime. There's a young organization that's really, we're very good with that. We go with them in demonstrations. A Palestinian started Palestinian youth, and so there's plenty of people who want to go out and speak. There are organizations. There are people out there, and you could very well join with them. You have to be careful. I always tell everybody, be careful. Don't say the Jews, or because Zionists want you to be labeled anti-Semitic, and right away when you say that, people look at you, that, and it's not that, it's Zionism. So if you, like in Iran, ironically, they're very careful. They don't call it the Jewish state or anything. They refer to it because they right away, Ayatollah Khomeini, right at the beginning, he said, I'm not against Jews, and he let the synagogues went on, and he went, but that's why Zionists hate him so much, hated him and hate Iran, I think, because he undermined their legitimacy, because he said, I'm not against Jews, we're not against Judaism, it's not Judaism, it's a simple Zionism, and they always refer to it as the Zionist regime, they never even say the state of Israel, they like to say Zionist, more or less, they say, be careful. So we tell people, be careful, don't say the Jews or the Jewish state, that Netanyahu wants to, he's careful, he wants that it should be referred to as the Jewish state. He wants that for one reason only, that people should have a problem in standing up in opposition.
What advice do you have for people who are now standing up in opposition, other than, be careful about your language?
Well, what can I say? A person should be ready and understand that you will be attacked as anti-Semitic. You may have problems with your jobs. You have to be, don't be, later, what would the word be? Don't be, I don't know. You shouldn't feel afterwards, you'll lose your confidence and so forth, because you weren't expecting to be attacked so viciously. Know that if you stand up, even it's a very good possibility you lose your friends, you lose your acquaintances, you lose your relatives, you lose your job and everything, God forbid. So be prepared, and if you can't, then do something less drastic. I'm not going to, dissuade somebody from doing good for Palestine, but be aware that you're standing up to the worst harassment that's possible, that it could happen. You have to be in, rabbis taught us, when you're standing up to a challenge, think of the worst that can come out of it, be prepared. So be prepared that if you're not up to it, I even tell Jewish people who call me from many states and different areas, that people call and I say to them, look, you're full of vigor, you want to stand up. I'm not going to tell you not to, but be prepared. Don't think it's that people may target you, and you have to be prepared for that. Again, I think I would tell people that they should just be they can point to us. We always tell people, point to the Jewish community and say, look, I'm not anti-Semitic. I'll show you the very religious communities. They're anti-Zionist. It's not anti-Semitic. That said, just to give you courage and give you support, emotional support and everything. But no, at the end of the day, the Zionists won't rest, and they're going to attempt to attack and to intimidate and silence. And we just had two. What did AIPAC do? Just two politicians just lost Cory Bush and
Jamal Bowman.
Yeah, Bowman, and clearly AIPAC put in millions of dollars.
Yeah. For
one reason only, not because they didn't feel they were doing their service for the community. They did it because it was against Israel. And a guy, Congressman Finley, wrote a book about that. He was a five-time incumbent or something, a congressman, and he started showing sympathy for the Palestinian people or speaking, whatever, and he lost his job. So, and there's more. They're not the only ones. So, that's the facts. That's what I could tell people. But at that time, at the same time, it's right to stand up. I tell people, we dare not be silent. And many people say, we're proud to, we're ready to lose, because, well, if I'm silent, people over there are dying. And so it's the question of my comfort zone, my comfort, and their death. So it's really right. I'll tell people what they're facing, but I'm not going to tell them that they shouldn't. They should be standing up, and we should be doing as much as we humanly possibly can with God's help.
What advice do you have for audience members, people who are going to be listening to this, who struggle to understand your mission, who maybe don't understand why Zionism is a problem, or really do care about Jewish people and completely believe that Hamas or the Palestinians want to hurt them?
Well, if they're watching this program, I hope they were able to hear. And if they didn't understand, they could contact us and they can ask again. But like we explained very clearly, if you believe in God, then you can't outsmart God, and you can't do the opposite of what God says. And especially God warns you, if you will rebel against him, it will bring death. Our rabbis warned us when they were being led to the concentration camps, to the gas chambers, not concentration, when they were being led to the gas chambers. We have witness of that. They said maybe we didn't stand up enough against the Zionism. It's God warns us that if we will rebel against him, we will try to leave exile, we will be hunted like animals. And that's what happened to Jewish people. I mean, you can't fight God and think, oh, well, I'm smarter and I'm going to be. You wouldn't go. If somebody has a tumor, you're not going to go take somebody who's a very brilliant person if he's not an expert in brain surgery. You're going to go brain surgeon. If the brain surgeon says this is the route to take, and the other guy said, well, I think theoretically my plan is a lot better. There's not one person on this world who's going to say you should take this guy who's brilliant instead of the guy who's a brain surgeon who has a track record of being able to, right? Here we're talking about the people who come and say they think that this is not the right route. God warns us that if you're going to rebel against him, this is the result. And God tells us it's evil. There's no justification for killing the people of Palestine. There's no justification of taking the land. It's all wrong. And it's not going to bring peace. We're saying simply if you believe in God because God says so, but it's simply also because, like I explained, you can't kill a people, you can't smother a people, and if you're gonna and also Hamas, clearly they all state they're not against Jews, but even you put that aside, the more every time you kill another person, you just inducted a family of 100 people to become Hamas, if you want to call Hamas the enemy. I mean, just according to the more every time you kill a person, it's so illogical. It's just it's crazy what they're saying. But again, Hamas clearly says they're not against Jews. We're just simply making enemies. They're making enemies. They're causing bloodshed. They're doing bloodshed and they're causing bloodshed and they're causing anti-Semitism. It's all the opposite, and it's all logical what we're saying, and it's Torah. It's Judaism. So it's very basic, it's very simple, and all our distinguished rabbinical authorities are saying what I'm saying. I'm not saying anything of my own theories. It's purely not my theories. It's just the basics of my Jewish religion.
What is one thing, if you could only change one thing about the world right now, what would that be?
I don't know if I'm qualified to answer that, but I mean, of course, it would be to believe in God, to believe in one God. The prophet said he put everything on one basic thing, and that is to believe in the one God.
And so in your fight against Zionism, you're trying to create or help create a better world. And what ideally would that world look like?
Well, first of all, when you say, let me just go back to the other thing. I mean, for the world is to believe in one God, and God would help that the Jewish people return to their covenant we made with God, which is the Torah, to follow the Torah. That would be as far as the Jewish people go. That would be my hope and yearning. And again, the last. So you just asked that. Repeat the last question again.
So you are trying to fight for a better world. When you succeed, what does the world look like?
Well, ideally, again, I mean, eventually, what we pray and hope for in all Jewish prayers, you can look in the Jewish prayer book. We yearn and hope for the day when God will reveal His glory, where all humanity will serve God in harmony. And as I said, I mentioned maybe to you, I'm not sure if the Isaiah wall there where it says the day in Isaiah, it's right across from the United Nations, a conclave wall. It's a beautiful wall, and etched in the wall, it says that the sheep and the wolf will rest together, and they will beat the sword into plowshares. Will live together in peace. One nation will not declare war on another nation anymore. So we'll be able to live in peace and serve God. I mean, and that's the eventual, ultimately, what we hope and pray for with the revelation of God. All humanity will serve Him in peace. But until that day, again, we are hoping for the day where we can, and we say in the Jewish high holiday prayers that God should put in the hearts and souls of the kings and rulers that they should strive for peace. That we should be able to live in peace, and ultimately, like I say, I hope the world should recognize one God and serve Him in peace. We can live together in peace.
When in the future, generations from now, people are looking back at us in our time, what do you want them to remember about either you specifically or your struggle as a whole?
Well, we hope that they recognize that that the Jewish people around the world, a large element, a large segment of the Jewish people, the ones who are really religious to do, they never accepted the occupation and always stood in opposition to it. They're there. The news media does not fairly portray them or give them enough space in their stories. Never. I mean, we've made thousands of the demonstrations through all these years, literally thousands. And I barely ever saw any writing of these demonstrations when there were thousands of people demonstrating. I still remember we were going to a demonstration in Manhattan, and there were thousands of people of us, and there was traffic jams in certain blocks. And they just said this traffic jams. They didn't even report why. While the Zionists make the smallest demonstration, they get all the airtime and they speak about it. If anything, they disparage us in the news media. Just now there was a report in the Daily Mail or something, a disgusting story on the Jewish anti-Zionist community in England, which is one of the main, and they wrote about some lady says that that she's beaten. We don't even. She says she's from our community. We don't know the name of that lady. And she writes a story how and they write it like it's a given. In other words, she said they write a whole story about us, about our community, and they write it like they say like this. But when they speak about her story, the way she said, so they write it like it's a given that was being hidden from them. But what she says is the truth. She says she's being beaten because she couldn't, she didn't uphold this, uphold that. Things that are crazy. Now, a community doesn't exist. We don't know the name of this person. It doesn't make sense because we have no idea. It's not such a tremendously large community. If you say a name of a person, we should know who it is. But they, like I say, they write it all like they finally hit upon the truth. It's hidden like it's some type of a cult. That was some type of a cult. When we're a Jewish community living and existing in a vibrant communities, and so it's. What can I say? So we hope that's what I say. But the betrayal, the slant is always constantly ridiculing, trying to portray us as some radical, weird. It happens to be there's so many things. For instance, in every hospital, all over in greater New York and around the world, more or less, we made our community, the anti-Zionist community, made a few of these things called Bikur Choam, visiting the sick. So they go to hospitals. They give not only to Jews but to Muslims. They inquire. You need something. You need food. You need full of food. There's even like rooms of kosher food in the hospitals. Anybody who needs, and we don't look at if you're anti-Zionist or not anti-Zionist. It all started in our communities. Tremendously multi-million-dollar organizations that carry around for the hospitals if anybody needs help. We have something called Hatzalah to save. If maybe you've seen, there's like cars all of a sudden, woo, the ambulance, cars all of a sudden, the lights start going, they start rushing through traffic. Maybe you've seen it. I don't know what area you're living in, but this was all that's free ambulatory service. It's young men who become, they learn first aid, and they're on call 24 hours. There's numbers in every community. You dial that number within a minute or 2 minutes, you'll have somebody at the door to save a person's life. And we've saved countless lives. That all started from the anti-Zionist community in Williamsburg. It started in our community, and it's around the world already. This is the Hatzalah. This is our community, but of course we're extreme, and we're this and we're that, so what can I say,
Is there any topic that you want to talk about before we wrap up?
Yeah, well, again, being that you mentioned this about how they portray us, like I say, I've heard story after story. There's some movies made about our communities and this and that. If there's a movie, you have to know that it's most probably all wrong. Why? Because in our communities, we don't even have smartphones as a general rule. We don't use the internet. We use it in our businesses or whatever, but it's filtered and so forth. Movies is a no-no by us. It's not, we don't go to movies. We don't have television. So if somebody went and made a movie it's either because if they're not from the very religious community, or if they were, they left the community. And usually they have some bitter taste of the community. And that's invariably, there have not been a straight story about our communities. That's first of all. And it's just important that people, understand that the portrayal is really a lousy portrayal. We wish the people of Palestine, that the message should get through the people of Gaza, the people of Palestine, really, that so many Jews that are so frustrated, our hearts are crying, we are hurting with the people of Palestine. We're feeling, we pray constantly for a free Palestine. We pray for them, and we would love to show our gratitude for the Muslim and Arab communities and the people of Palestine, that we appreciate that we've been embraced and we were living together for these hundreds of years. So it's something that we love people to understand, that Judaism and Zionism is diametrically opposite. The representation of Judaism is a Jew who's trying, it says, it's in our Jewish teaching, it says, Mahu rachum afatate rachum. You should emulate God. Just as God is compassionate, you should be compassionate. We teach our children, if we take a child to a store and he grabs a candy, so the first thing you'll hear a Jewish mother says to a kid, that's a chilul Hashem, he's stealing. I mean, a kid take a candy, but she won't allow that, because we're not allowed to steal less than a penny's worth. That's a Jewish law. I mean, but she will. The first thing she'll say to him, that's a desecration of God's name. We constantly teach our children that beside the fact you're not allowed to steal or kill, you have to do kindness, you have to emulate God, and if not, you're desecrating God's name. We're here to be an example of something of godliness, that people should look at us and say, that's the right way to act. That's a godliness. That's what we feel. It's our responsibility. And you tell a child, that's a chilul Hashem. What you did is a chilul Hashem. You desecrate, or it's a kiddush Hashem. You just did a good deed. You helped somebody. And we're required to look to do kindness, not only to Jewish people, and not only to human beings, even to an animal is required in Judaism, not to harm. You're not allowed to torture an animal, and on and on. Even to an object, you're not allowed to take a glass and just break it, because it's something from God. You have to. So that's the way we look at our lives, and we hope that people should see that and understand that and appreciate that, and hopefully the day will come when we will be able to live together, and people should do that amongst the Jewish communities entirely.
Do you have any call to action for the audience? Anywhere you'd like them to visit online?
Well, people can go to our site, nkusa.org. Sometimes we, let people know when we're doing actions or whatever, and spread our word. And we do come to universities, to mosques, to anywhere we're asked to come and speak. We go, we speak. We don't charge for our speaking. We feel it's our godly, obligation. So we go all over and we plead people should spread the word, and do. Like I say, don't get intimidated. Do what you can.
Well, Rabbi Weiss, thank you for your time. Thank you for your words. Thank you for all that you do. It's much appreciated. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
And you can use pictures on our sites. If you need high definition, we can give you high definition, better pictures or whatever quality. And if you have a question, feel free to contact us in the future with God's help.
Of course. Thank you.
Thank you.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of the Direct Action Podcast. Learn more at directactionunited.org. Organizing the working classes of the world in solidarity forever.